Sorry, yes.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and call the Committee of the Whole to order. Today is Monday, March 13th, 2023, and I've got 7:01 now. We will begin with the Parks Department with a presentation. Director.
Thank you.
Or Mayor, excuse me.
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I'll go ahead and kick this off. This is an update on the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan. I've been talking to Council about that for a few weeks now. And as Director Farrell and I have shared several times, the administration has been working on an update to the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan for about the last 9 months or so. This project is a refresh to the 2006 Comprehensive Parks Master Plan that was done, as well as the 2015 plan that really focused on just the operational aspects of the department. In order to engage and begin this process, we engaged Pros Consulting to lead this effort. They are the same organization, in fact, the same gentleman that led the 2006 plan as well as the 2015 plan. This plan, once adopted, will guide future decisions by our Parks Board, by the administration, by this council on policy, maintenance, programming, project investment, and even operational expenditures for the Department of Parks and Recreation for the next decade. It covers all of those things. That's why they call it a comprehensive plan. Tonight we are presenting the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan much the same way that we do with the budget. That is, we will provide you with a copy of the document. It is approximately 190 pages of wonderful reading for you. We will talk to you tonight about what you can expect to see in this document, how and what information was gathered to inform that document, and how this plan correlates with the long-term capital improvement plan that we have been working on and will be bringing to you in just a couple of weeks. Then we're going to give you some time to review this, digest it, and then we'll come back to you after the CIP is presented and then begin the formal process of legislative process to have this adopted by council, which certainly will allow for all of that Q&A discussion and evaluation that needs to happen. So now I'd like to turn it over to Director Farrell and take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'd actually like to start off. We have some representation from the Parks and Recreation Board as well as the Foundation. So when I call your name, if you could give a wave, that would be fantastic. First off, we have Eric Miller. Eric is on the Parks and Recreation Foundation as well as the Parks and Recreation Board. We also have Jan Ross, also on the Parks and Recreation Board as well as the Parks and Recreation Foundation. We have Lee Tucker, who is the chair of the Parks and Recreation Foundation. And I will double check to see if anybody else snuck in while I was speaking. Looks like that's all we have for the evening. So appreciate the support there, and obviously look forward to utilizing this plan in the efforts of progress within both of those organizations. Wanted to start off the evening with a representation of the history behind the Parks Master Plan, similar to what Mayor Jadwin had stated. In 2006, Woolpert as well as Pros Consultants managed the plan. The outcomes of those plans really helped to identify the wants and the needs of the community, and that formulated the decision-making in order to move the department forward. In 2015, there was an update made to that plan. Due to budget constraints at that particular time, the scope of that plan was minimized to ultimately operations. Both of those plans ultimately provided a lot of process and policies that helped the department make those decisions and make a lot of action within the city. In 2022, the department recognized the need for an update to that plan just due to the passage of issue 12 as well as other changes throughout the community. It was the right time to make an update to this plan. The plan is fully comprehensive, so it does include everything from operations, staffing, how we maintain, to capital improvements. Due to the historic knowledge and the success of the previous plans, we did opt to enter into a contract with Pros Consultants with the support and approval of City Council and Mayor Jadwin. So tonight we are fortunate to have Mr. Leon Younger, President of Pros Consultants. He is well versed with the City of Gahanna, and he's been working with us over the past year with this plan. So I'd like to introduce him, and he'll allow an overview of this process.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you kind of our overall approach to this plan. Tonight, I know you just got a copy of the full comprehensive plan, but some of you I know have worked with me over the last 6 months, just sharing information, getting feedback on where we are on certain processes and certain elements of the plan. And tonight, I'm making a presentation about how to read the plan so you're informed. Obviously, there's an executive summary, but there is a process that we went through in this work. So a lot of times people feel like there's a difference of opinion about what a comprehensive plan is. And for Pros, I started Pros 28 years ago. Prior to that, I was the director of Indianapolis Parks and Recreation, and actually worked in Ohio at Lake Metro Parks up in Cleveland, where I was the director there for 6 years. And so really a comprehensive plan is a guiding document for the community on how a park system can meet the current and emerging needs of residents and create vibrancy in the community. It should embrace the history of the community, is accountable to the present and looks for the future, and includes an internal assessment, community engagement, data collection, and the development of action plan. But it does not focus on one particular asset, but provides an understanding of the system, parks and recreation landscape, both today and in the future. So our goals for this plan was to engage the community leadership and stakeholders. We had great participation from the foundation as well as the Parks and Recreation Board that supported us, and also we got a lot of input from them on the vision for the park system. And really to ensure there's an appropriate balance between programs, facilities, and services. We wanted to utilize a wide variety of data sources. So we included stakeholder interviews, focus group meetings. We did 2 surveys, one a statistically valid survey, as well as an online survey, which I'll share with you in a little bit. We wanted to determine the unique level of service standards to develop an appropriate action for the city and as it applies to parks, recreation, and facilities and trails. We wanted to really shape the financial and operational preparedness through innovative opportunities and funding sources, and we wanted to develop a dynamic and realistic action plan that creates a roadmap to ensure long-term success. So as Stephanie and the team is presenting this plan, part of that action plan is to report back to you either quarterly or every 6 months where they are in the plan. What's being done, what processes are they in, and at what stage are they actually implementing the plan, so that as you go through the budget process and as you go through park and recreation opportunities, they are sharing with you where they are in the various stages and what actually gets approved. So the plan is a living document for the really next 5, 6, or 7 years, whatever, how long you guys stay with the plan. So the next piece of this, and this just really describes for everybody in the audience. So we did a lot of data review. One of the things I really found after doing this plan 8 years later is just really how much had been implemented since the last plan. I was pleasantly surprised the amount of improvements that were done in the parks. And it was a credit to the staff who basically have a really good process in place as it applies to capital improvements and where your assets are in their life cycle. And all assets have a life cycle, just at different times. You got some that are needing some updates, like you all know your pool. But in terms like playgrounds are typically updated every 15, 17 years. So, but they have a great handle. I was telling Stephanie today that I think it's some of the best life cycle work I've seen. And we've done 350 to 400 master plans around the country. We've done a lot here in this region. We've done Westervilles, Dublin's. We're we've done Delaware, Orange County, the city of Columbus. So I see what goes on here. And they've done a really good job tracking where their assets are and how functional those assets are, because everything about parks is about experiences. How to create the kind of experiences that people want to come back, use your facilities, and always talk about that's the place to go for really having a great experience. So we benchmarked you against other agencies. We did a financial analysis of the system, a program assessment. We did levels of service to see where you are in comparison to other agencies as well as across Ohio. We did surveys. We had 615 return surveys out of 2,000 households, which is a pretty good return on investment. And we had, on the online survey, we had 177 return on the online surveys. And of course, the demographic and trends update. And then the prioritization and capital plan. We did a capital plan, but the capital plan was moved over to the comp plan so that they're in sync with each other. And I know the mayor just basically said you guys are going to have an opportunity to view that. The parks side of that capital is in that report. And then an action plan. So that kind of tells you where that is. One of the things that in the survey that we really looked at is we asked people, do you have a need for something? And then if you have a need, how important is it? I might have a need, but it's not that important. The intent is to marry, I have a need to how important something is. And just to highlight that what people said are most important, it's called a priority ranking, investment ranking, just shares that these are the things that are most important. Your trail system 8 years ago was really something important in terms of people wanted to see it completed. And you've done a lot in that, but trails still show up. And the reason is trail shows up not only here, but across the country as the number one amenity that people are looking for because you can walk on it, you can bike on it, you can run on it, and it's free. And so consequently, that's what people like, but they also want a connected system. And the way you're heading with your trail system, it actually is a system into itself. So the opportunity there still shows up as a very important element of the park system. An indoor aquatic center. Everybody, you've all talked about it. I know it's on your radar. And so, but that still shows up as an important element. Obviously, restrooms in parks. Farmers market, I know you have a separate group that does a farmers market, but a farmers market is an event every week, and people like it. Indoor walking, jogging track, which requires some level of a community facility. An outdoor amphitheater. Paved trails, outdoor adventure park, multi-use unpaved trails, and then water access and splash pads. But in that blue area, there are a lot of other things that are up there. And pretty much in the low priority, either have it or your people are satisfied, like golf course shows up there. Golf is important here, but you already have it, so it's a low priority. It's really, what are we trying to do in the upper, all of the red and in the blue, because that's what people are saying that are important to them. Likewise, we did this for programming. And I come from the prospect that you're either self-directed program or you're organized recreation. And so from an organized recreation perspective, the farmers market, adult fitness and wellness, community special events, cultural enrichment, adult sports, senior fitness and wellness, water fitness, swim lessons, after-school programs, nutrition programs, fitness and personal training, and pickleball showed up as the top 12. Well, all of these have wide age segment appeal. You know, people used to think that pickleball was only for seniors, but pickleball continues to grow at all levels and very competitive across the board. So this is what your community says. And so if you're trying to please and trying to engage them and trying to actually support them, these are the kind of recreation programs that drive future development of amenities in your system. So defining the park and recreation, these are your mission, your vision, your core values and theme. Each one of these provide a direction about how the system wants to be managed, as well as what its future is. And the vision to enhance and preserve parks and recreation services, lands, and facilities through high standards of innovation, and that positions Gahanna as a leading community and a great place to live, work, and play. Core values, integrity, safety, respect, service, teamwork, exploration, and sustainability. All of these, this is how the park system wants to be viewed by their users, by the council, by key people in your community. And the theme here is explore and grow with Gahanna Parks and Recreation. From key priorities in the action plan. Again, when you see the action plan, it's going to give you a goal, an action. It will give you a goal, a recommendation, an action, who's going to do it, and what are the outcomes that you're going to see that come from that. And as I opened up, part of this is to actually provide Stephanie's group to give you updates on the processes where they are in the action plan. But here, we want to update and add existing parks, trails, and amenities across the city. You're pretty balanced. When you look at the plan, there are actually maps that depict where how balanced your city are between neighborhood parks, community parks, playgrounds, sports fields, courts. You'll see how balanced the city is. You know, the only real weakness, and you all know it, and I'm not telling you anything, but indoor space is a weakness. I mean, we actually are, the committee, the steering committee that we were working with, we actually had Tony here, and we talked a lot with them about the opportunities. They don't have the ability to actually build things. They want to manage them, but they don't want to build them. And we had a conversation with him regarding that, and I recognize that because it's hard to raise money for those kind of things like that, because it just is. And then the second thing is replace and build new recreation facilities and attractions to the city. Seek a dedicated funding source for capital. I know you passed your funding source a couple years ago, which has really helped the system and the city. But this one big ticket item takes a lot of energy, and I know that that's something that's on your radar. It would balance the park system for the future. That would be in developing an indoor community center and house senior services and all of the other core businesses that you're in. And then maximize program options to activate parks, increase use of recreation facilities. The best park systems in the country know how to activate spaces. So you create them, you know how to activate them. And that's what makes a great park system. So an example of that, you'll see there's a vision, there's a goal, and you'll see it in the plan. And then these are the actions, and these are listed. And then the actions go into who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and what's a measurable outcome that goes with it. So I'm sharing that with you so you know when you're reading the document, how the document flows and why it does what it does. Okay? So that's my 15 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Younger and Director Farrell. Questions from council, comments? Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
When you listed, I meant to ask, I could have asked this a couple of meetings ago. What's the difference between trails, like you've got trails and trails? Like,
There's soft surface trails, hard surface trails.
okay,
There are spine trails, and then there are link trails.
Okay.
There are loop trails. So that, I mean, you've got them all, but
Okay.
the intent is taking all your spine trails and linking neighborhoods into the spine trails. So people never have to cross the street. They can actually get on a trail through your city.
does it take into effect trails in parks? I mean, like hiking trails?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
I mean, you've got a lot of nice hiking trails through your natural areas, and I know that that's one of our recommendations in the plan is continue to build that, because people do want access to natural trails.
I know that many of you were at the town hall that we presented last Tuesday, and I will let Director Farrell speak to this as well, but you heard a recitation of a lot of the projects that have been done by the Parks and Recreation Department already or that are underway. And really what those were showing is projects that were in line with objectives and goals that had been identified under the previous and actually existing Parks Master Plan, and that actually there's overlap with the Parks Master Plan and objectives and goals that are now being proposed. So, I don't know, Director, if you want to speak a little bit more to that.
I'll add, so what we did was take a look at the projects that we already have in play that have either been funded or are already in action, and tied those together to an action plan to show that there's the justification for the want and the need and the process of how we're going to accomplish these actions. So tying it directly to a specific project or program, whatever that may be, an initiative, it helps to draw back to the master plan and the work that was done. As I mentioned, previously, it really is a living and breathing document. It's something that we will reference often. As Leon stated, it's something that will require updates for. So as we move forward with plans, if there's a policy change, if there is a request for funding for operations or for capital, we'll be able to tie back that directly to the master plan and how that would impact the action plan positively.
So again, this document is very thick. It's lovely. You can read it online if you don't want to have to print it all out. But, and I don't know what page the action plans start in this.
It's an appendix item.
It's an appendix item. So I would encourage you to make sure as you go through this document, you take a look at those action plans. That is what effectively will guide us. Once this plan is adopted and we have the discussion and tweak this as necessary to meet council's approval as well. But that action plan or those action plans that are listed in the back is what we will use as we do the budget, as we work on the CIP, as we prioritize programs and projects and operations and staffing. If setting those goals and objectives within this plan is what will create the bumper cars, so to speak, for us as we go forward, to make sure, for example, Councilwoman Regard, you brought up trails. So if Parks were to come and say, we're going to put a Taekwondo facility in every Parks facility because our Parks superintendent likes Taekwondo and that's what we're going to do. Well, that's not anywhere in the action plan. It doesn't make sense for us to do that. So are the projects and the programs and operations that we are proposing to bring forward consistent with this plan? That's what will guide us. And then, I don't know, also, if you want to speak to, did you mention the funding aspect of this and how this plays into funding?
Well, what we try to do is, you want to talk about it? Okay. Is we identify funding sources that you should consider to be as broad as you can. I know the foundation has been a real asset for you, but we need more funding sources. And most park systems have 25 to 30 different funding sources because they can't get it out of one single funding source. They're usually getting it from a combination of user fees, sponsorships, foundations, from grants. And, you know, on a 100-point grant with the state, this plan, having an approved document, gives you 10% bonus points by just having an approved document, because the documents follow what the state guidelines are for system master plans.
Thank you. I think that last point really underscores the benefit of a plan to the community. I know, Mayor, you've talked in other contexts about, you know, this city has had plans over the past decades, and now we're in a spot where we're trying to implement some of those plans and take action on them. And I think it's easy if you're just standing back and you're not in the day-to-day work of it, you don't see the real benefit of having that guide in doing the job and having the plan throughout. And right there is dollars and cents, being able to have the extra bonus points when you seek outside funding. So I think that's important. Ms. Ames?
Yeah, the length of this, is this like a 20-year, 10-year?
Typically, agencies, depending on how fast they move on the plan, most agencies, we write it for a 10-year strategy, but a lot of agencies get all the recommendations done 7, 8 years. And so when they know they're going to finish the plan out, they'll do another update because they want to stay ahead of what the public's expectation is of the park system.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bowers?
Yeah, if I could just address like process a little bit to start. So we, as you guys all know, we received this document at less than 2 hours, or about 2 hours ago. So clearly not enough time for us to review it. And I heard from the mayor's comments that you intend to have this back as part of the capital improvement plan.
After. So we presented this the same way that the budget typically has been presented, where you receive the budget the same day that it is presented to you. So it really was, here's the work, understand how it came together, here's an overview of what you can expect to see. Now that you kind of understand what you're reading, go back and take a look at it, and then we'll come back in a few weeks in April after you have time to adjust it, after we talk about the CIP, and that's presented to you, and we begin those discussions so that you can see how the two meld together. Because then I think the conversation makes a lot more sense after you have an opportunity to hear both of those. It is a significant document. It's going to take you some time to get through it, and we want you to be thoughtful about it. But it's difficult to read if you don't understand what it is you're looking at and what the overall objective and goal of the plan is. So that was part of the reason why we decided to present it the same way that we do the budget. So hopefully that helps.
And sir, you'll be back when we have this back again to committee of the whole?
Well, go ahead.
The intention was that I would bring it forward that first meeting of April to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, since that'll be really the only time that we have to ask substantive questions, it might be best if we have the consultant here as well to explain some of the process. Not that you, Director, wouldn't be able to do that, but since we really don't have the opportunity to ask much in the way of substantive questions tonight.
Well, a Cleveland person, we always want to have a Cleveland person.
Leon likes Gahanna.
Mr. Renner?
Yeah, I just going to, Stephanie, the Director Farrell and I actually talked a little bit about this, and one of the things that I was recommending is that we keep the Parks Master Plan as a discussion item on our Committee of the Whole, so that as our colleagues are starting to go through and digest, we can probably keep that dialogue fresh and in front of us, and instead of waiting till April, but actually as a continuum basis until that time. Is that still amenable, or?
Absolutely. I think that's fair.
Okay.
And we don't expect this to be, okay, here it is, adopt it and move on. We expect this to be an ongoing dialogue. I mean, the goal certainly is to have this adopted by the end of the year. But, you know, I don't know that we had a firm timeline. That's up to council's will.
Thank you.
I think there's just lots of whys, you know, should we, whatever, and it's going to be, I think, something really wonderful for the community.
I guess I'll wrap things up on this one just by expressing our thanks, and thanks to your board and foundation members for being here as well, and for all that you do. Thank you, Mr. Younger, and so we will look forward to welcoming you back in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, item C, items from the Department of Engineering. I've got one ordinance here, 16-2023. Director, good evening.
Chair Weaver, members of council, on March 1st, the city received bids for the 2023 street program. Included for reference is a map indicating the scope of work, street rebuilds, asphalt overlay, and some preventative maintenance, crack seal, slurry seal, as well as for reference, the bid summary. We received two bids, one from Strasser Paving and the other from Decker Construction. This is comparable to past programs between 5.5, 6 miles worth of pavement reconstruction and preventative maintenance and street rebuilds. Staff is recommending award to the lowest and most responsive bidder, Strasser Paving, inclusive of an ad alternate for the Woodside Green parking lot as well. Bids came in on the base bid just under, or around 4% over the engineer's estimate, and total with the Woodside Grain parking lot right around 5% over the engineer's estimate. We're seeing some of the trends on asphalt, concrete, just with labor and material costs going up, but still within the 10%, and recommending award to Strasser. And we'll open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Director. And I appreciate you touching on the increase in cost. Full disclosure to my colleagues, I had read in the Dispatch today an article that spoke to just just that issue about the increase in costs, particularly as it relates to asphalt, and even your predecessor was quoted in the article. So sent that along and appreciate you touching on that. Questions from colleagues? Mrs. Bowers.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. I wanted to follow up because the two bids were relatively close to each other Decker was within 10% of the bid from Strasser. Have we been tracking total final costs with all of our vendors, at least in the engineering department or particularly with Strasser, to see where they have fallen within our 10% contingency that we allocate for these projects?
Yes, as far as projects from years past, when there is a change order issued, we look at, was there a field condition that otherwise necessitated that work, and we do track that. I can share that information on a follow-up.
That would be helpful. I think the question that I have is, when we're looking at such a narrow margin between these two bidders, is the lowest bidder consistently giving us accurate bids since we have a history of using Strasser, or are we seeing them underbid potentially?
And then make up for it in like change orders.
Correct.
That has not been my experience, but this is kind of my first year in the program. Definitely look at that as we do evaluate the program at the conclusion of the project. I believe there's about a $200,000 difference between the two.
This is the third year or fourth year that we've used Strasser for our street program.
I know that they were the lowest bid last year. I cannot speak to other years, but I can research that and report back.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Padova.
To your knowledge, have we used Decker in the past or recent past?
I do not know that. I have worked with Decker in past and other governmental agencies that I've worked for. They do great work as well.
And has the working with Strasser, has that been a good experience? Has their work been?
I've had comparable experience with both.
Okay.
Very good.
And I also noticed that like the Woodside Green parking lot, that was actually lower for Decker. I'm guessing we're not able to like split those,
No,
award
we're
them
not.
separately. Okay. Just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
After this year, how many miles of Detroit streets do we have left?
I do not have the inventory of Detroit streets, but I know a significant number of those have been rebuilt, and we also have streets that have waterbound macadam streets, and the base of those streets deteriorate just as well. Okay. So we'll be rebuilding other streets throughout the community as well over time.
Director, do you mind clarifying for those of us who are still relatively new on council what the Detroit-style streets are, please?
So that's a integral concrete where you have the concrete base and the curb and gutter monolithic pour, and then over time the concrete pavement came in disrepair, and an asphalt overlay occurred over top of that, and then caused drainage issues along the curb, where the curb and gutter actually would be. In certain instances, poor under drain, with the lack of under drain and stormwater carrying the drainage under the pavement and causing base failures. So as a part of the rebuilds, we're putting in curb and gutter that has under drain to protect the base and preserve the longevity of the roadway.
I guess just one more question as it relates to this particular item. About a year ago, when this last came before council, there were some concerns about the quality of work from Strasser. I think your predecessor and then Director Crawford as well expressed that any issues were being adequately addressed by the vendor, and it was comparable to other, it was within that same range of acceptable errors, for lack of a better word, that would be corrected, and has the past year proven to be similar?
So as far as punch list items, it's been similar.
Like honeycombing and stuff like that, that would come back. I know that was curbs, but
Yeah, and so
Other
those
similar
items would be on punch list and likely did not get a good, I guess, the vibration and getting that concrete through the forms to get a more monolithic and full concrete section. So we do have inspection through in-house technicians as well as third-party consultants out there inspecting the work and accepting and rejecting that work and placing it on punch list for corrective action towards the tail end of the project.
okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Renner.
I just have a follow-up on that, and thank you, Director, for actually talking about that. When your projects go out public for whatever given street, will it be known who a resident could call or contact in case they see issues or have issues? And let me just preface a little bit about Strasser. There's a little bit of a friction with our residents. You weren't here during that time last year, but there was some called into questions about the fidelity of their work, if you will. My street also included, inverted downspout pipes, you know, what have you, with the curves. So I'm just more interested in who can residents during these projects call when they see something or they have issues?
So they can call the engineering department, and we have a project administrator. Brian Kennedy is our new project administrator. He'll be overseeing it, as well as engineering technicians, inspectors, and we will be having some assistance from a third-party vendor as well to augment staff.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilman, if I could add, I do remember the lengthy discussion we had at council. I think that was the program before last year, maybe it was 2021 program. I don't believe that we had the same types of issues with the 2022 program.
Okay. Yeah, my memory, don't trust my memory anymore, so.
That's okay.
But thank you.
Well, thank you. I guess, since there were some follow-up items, did you want this to come back to committee? Okay, so maybe we put it on for first and then come back to committee and then consent afterwards?
Sure.
Does that work? Okay. All right. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up, item D, items from council office. We got a couple resolutions here. 11-2023, this was a resolution strongly urging the Ohio governor and members of the General Assembly to restore the local government fund to pre-recession levels. My colleagues might recall, now that we are members of the Ohio Municipal League, and a couple weeks ago they had sent out a plea to members urging the municipalities to not only contact their legislators, but also to pass a resolution, do whatever they could in support of the restoration of the local government fund. Thanks to Ms. Bowers, we worked together to put together this resolution doing just that. I also want to express my thanks to Director Burry for providing us with some of the statistics. I believe were included in the memo as well. Happy to answer any questions, comments from colleagues. Okay.
It would be wonderful if it can happen.
Yeah.
And I listened to some things that with the ability of people, we are supposedly going to be paying more taxes. And indeed, that would would certainly not create monies to be coming to the fund. I'm trying to be very nice about it. but however, so, obviously, it would be wonderful to have all of that back. I don't know how much is not back, but clearly, we could use it, because we certainly would like to have swimming pools and all these community things.
Well, I think that, Ms. Angelo, you underscore a good point, is that the cuts to the local government fund weren't done overnight. It's been years now in the making, and communities have been forced to rely on other funding streams to make up for that difference. Are folks okay with consent then on that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Moving on, the next resolution, this was the 12-2023 resolution recognizing and honoring March 2023 as Theater in Our Schools Month. Very similar to the resolution that presented last year, hoping to have some folks from the high school next week in attendance. No secret behind it, a proud GLHS theater alum here, Otterbein Musical Theater alum, so I believe strongly and passionately in theater and the arts in our schools, so appreciate my colleagues' consideration, and I know I'm not the only artist up here on the dais, so but any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Weaver, for the resolution.
Thank you. Did you have something, Mrs. McGregor? All right, consent okay? All right. Thank you. Item E, discussions, facilities update, 825 Tech Center Drive. Senior Director Schultz.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
Give me 20 seconds here, not even, there we go, I think. Nope. There we go. Apparently I'm stuck in other modes here. I'm not quite sure why. I guess we're going to have to do this old-fashioned way. So I will improvise slightly. Sorry about the size of the screen, but this is as good as I'm going to be able to do right at the moment. But basically, by way of review, we were here about a month ago, actually February 13th, and we went over the first few engagements that we've had with our design architect. As you see on the screen right now, these are the guiding principles that each and every time we meet as a design team, if you would, these are the different things that we go over and that we keep front of mind when we're talking about the design of 825 Tech Center Drive. So I like to keep these in front of everybody as we go through the process, as the architect likes to go through the process with us. Make those a little bit bigger for you. But a lot of the things that we've been doing as time has gone on in the 4 weeks that we've met is we've done a lot of benchmarking in the last 4 weeks. We've done site visits in Marysville, Dublin, and in Westerville. And in Westerville, we've actually been back to Westerville. 2 different groups have been to Westerville. So we've done those 4 tours in the last 4 weeks, and we've got to see a lot of different design, things we like, things we don't like. I think it's just as important to look at things that are not as becoming of our project, so we know what not to do as well as what to do. We've looked at things like finish quality. Right, when we walk in this particular city hall and this particular chambers, it's finished in a certain way. When you walk in, high-end houses, if you would, that they look a certain way, and versus the house that maybe, we live in or that I live in. So we got to see a lot of different parts and pieces and things, again, that we like, things that we like from a police department standpoint, things that we like from an administration standpoint. And this has really guided the last 3 or 4 weeks that we've been working with the design team in order to design 825 and some of the things that we like. They've walked us through this process. They continue to walk us through this process. Again, this is one of the slides that I showed last month. but some of the things on the site that we like and things that we want to enhance and design around versus some of the things that maybe need some improvement. But again, those are all things, and this is all part of the schematic process. We're looking at the outside of the building, we're looking at the inside of the building, we're looking at different flows and how things work. Not calling any of the three locations that we went and saw, but there were some that flowed very well from a police department standpoint or an administration standpoint, and there were others that didn't. There were nice parts and pieces, units that we can maybe pick up and put down, as part of the design, but things, Chief was able to see, for example, distances from, where an officer would grab his duty bag and have to head out to the door in order to get into a cruiser, maybe where they were just too great. And we're able to comment on those things to our design architects so we can make sure that we're, having a responsible design, if you would, or a better design than maybe some of the other places that we saw. That work continues by and large, that schematic design for the interior of the building. And what we've also done in this particular period of time is we've had individual meetings with individual departments that have really gone in and refined the space program, right? So we spend a lot of time with Chief and the police folks to talk about, well, now we really understand what a 2,000 square foot room looks like. Make a note of that because this is about a 2,000 square foot room. This is that large enough? Is that not large enough? What are some of the reasons and challenges why it should be bigger, should be smaller for that matter, right? Storage is a great example of this. So when we talk about storage, I know that we all are hoping and wishing that we go and return back to paper time, where things were mailed to us and memos were written and paper was received. But the reality of it is that that's not the direction in which we're headed. So do we need these large storage rooms that have many, many file cabinets in it, such that would consume a lot of space? The answer there is obviously no, and those are a lot of the things and a lot of the decisions that we're beginning to refine and make. So where I'd like to continue next is with some questions for you folks. I don't believe that there's ever a question that isn't already have an answer to it, or what I'll say is a prescribed answer to it, right? So what we see at the top of the screen in the next few slides here, 4 or 5 slides, are questions for you folks and some things that we can have dialogue around. So what is the council chambers? We're speaking specifically of the room in which you guys come in and host a meeting like this, but what is the planned capacity, right? So the planned capacity of this particular room is 131 people. I don't know why we can't be 132 or 130 even, but it's 131 people as established by the fire marshal. The planned capacity at 825 will be about a total capacity of about 150 people. So that's a seating capacity of about 120 to 140 people. The 10 of you folks that sit around the dais, there's really 11 folks that sit around the dais when we take Angie into consideration as the tech person tonight. It'll have a dedicated staff space of about 12 people. So staff will have a place inside of city council chambers that they can come and sit, have a table in front of them and prepare, and in some instances even provide a little bit of a buffer between the presenter and the audience, which brings about the total capacity to approximately 150 people. I think the key part and piece here is that the lobby and the way in which the lobby is designed, the lobby will definitely accommodate an overflow type crowd to the point where it would be equipped with AV equipment, parts and pieces, so that my voice is heard out in the lobby, which is adjacent to city council chambers, and also serve as a place that if we were having a larger gathering, people could also be watching this meeting out there in that particular space as if they were in the room. So I can pause here and take questions, or I can continue to the next question and ask questions and then have dialogue with you folks as we go. That's your preference, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Director Schultz. I think President Renner had something.
I do. Thank you very much. And colleagues on council, I apologize. Mr. Schultz is reminding me of a document. He did ask us for early input on these things that he's presenting. Jeremy, I gave it to Jeremy, who actually gave some very thoughtful, high-level responses on this, and I meant to actually then turn around and share it with all of you, and I just forgot. But this is your opportunity, whether it's in the document or not, Kevin is asking for input on these matters. So again, you have a document that actually outlines all of this, and I sent it to everybody tonight.
Thank you, sir. I'll also make the note that not necessarily, not necessarily, definitely not your only opportunity. But for some of the guiding parts and pieces or principles that the architect is using, some of these questions need answered. The other note that I'll make that I forgot to mention is that the, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. That's the next slide, so I wouldn't want to share.
But one thing, and I did a very quick skim, but, so it might be in here, but did you factor in space for the presenters?
There is not, in the 150 total presenters, like outside guests like Leon, he's not counted in that number.
Well, that would be part of the seating capacity overall, though,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Right. I mean, well, he is
He's
factored
factored in, he's just not, he's not accounted for specifically.
Specifically. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're asking something that's more of a specific layout type of thing, and that we're not to that level yet. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Correct.
Right. There are some
From
design
both
features that we'll talk about on the next slide. But how it's arranged, is it arranged in this fashion where we have two tables sitting at the front and we're presenting in that fashion? Those are very detailed design decisions that we can make somewhere down the road. We saw some council chambers as an example where the presenter's actually off to the side and presenting a little bit more off by him or herself, which was nice. It has its pros and cons, but those are all things that when you guys feel what that dais feels like and how you interact with the public or a member of staff, those are some decisions that we'll end up having to make, but further down the road.
Ms. Bowers had a question.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to cut anybody off if you have specific feedback for Mr. Schultz, but I know for me, the agenda item was just a general facilities update. I'm not prepared to give specific feedback, and this is an incredibly important project, and I would like to have the opportunity to really weigh this out and give very thoughtful feedback. So maybe a suggestion would be to have a couple 6 o'clock workshop meetings just before a committee or a council meeting, if that works with timing, so that we can have some time to look over what Mr. Renner has forwarded to us tonight. And now that we know that you're actually looking, that this is where we're at in the stage, I'd like to have that opportunity.
Sure.
I think we actually would prefer that, because I think we have very detailed meetings, and it's very easy to get lost in the weeds, and to do that within the context of an actual council meeting, I think could be difficult. So having the ability to have those discussions through a workshop, it would still be a publicly noticed meeting, but having that just be the topic that we have to work through, I think would be very helpful.
And I know we can, if it's more than 3 of us, it needs to be, publicly noticed. If it's 3 or fewer, it can be, a more informal workshop, working session. Happy to, of course, bring that back to the council, to the body and to be open. But when it's a workshopping through some of these just space ideas and things like that, I'd be happy to be able to sit at a conference room table and engage in that space with you.
Yeah, and I would say, to the mayor's comments also, we recognize the importance of the project, and whatever time you need from us or a project committee team, whatever that looks like, before council. Sometimes council goes a little bit long, so I can't promise after council necessarily.
Yeah, no, thank
But before, on a Tuesday afternoon, whatever that might look like, whatever's easiest for you guys. If we need to have some one-on-one conversations where we're sitting down around a particular set of drawings, we're free to do that. Whatever you 7 really feel is the appropriate mechanism to do that, we're open to any and all suggestions in that regard. Because this is, obviously, it's just as important to you folks as it is to, every resident out there in the city.
Do we know offhand if we have any special or 6 o'clock meeting next week or the week after?
I don't know of anything.
Is that something that my colleagues would be interested in doing?
Yeah, sure. It's something that we talked about previously. I just wasn't aware that we're actually at that granularity. I don't think we need a workshop meeting to talk about seating overall seating capacity. But once we get down to some of the nuts and bolts about what layout is and what we need, absolutely.
And we are, and I agree, Mr. Renner, we're in the schematic design phase, right? So that's where you get a diagram, if you would, of where things are being placed inside of the building and those types of things, what a potential space could look like. Sometimes these things look more formal than they really are. I do have some visuals. Visuals on this particular screen are harder to see and harder to look at. If I could go through the rest of my questions here, only to give the architect some, because the architect needs to continue to move. That's not to say that we don't have dialogue or an opportunity for dialogue next week, the week after, whatever that might be. But if I can give them a little bit of feedback, basically, I have three more slides, I think it is, maybe 4, 3.
Why don't we finish, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine.
Why don't we go ahead and finish up with the rest of your slides, and then we can sort of take the temperature and see where we are and what the will is here.
There we go. And I'll go through the slides, and then you guys can have some dialogue afterwards. So what are the design features of the city council chamber? So we'll have a double high ceiling similar to what we have in this particular room now. I would say that the room is actually going to be a little bit wider because of the next bullet on the list, the next 2 bullets actually. We'll have a shorter dais. We've heard a lot in the short time that I've been here is that the dais is a little bit too imposing, a little bit too formal. We've seen a lot of smaller dais. We've seen a lot of smaller dais that are a lot more welcoming and a lot more inviting to the public. And this is a comment that Jeremy made in one that is very much appropriate. But right, you guys, I'm imagining it's hard for Miss Angelou to see Miss McGregor sitting down the other end of the dais. So if you were to get a little bit wider and a little bit more in, I'm sorry?
More like you can't see the ones in the middle.
You can't see the ones in the middle, right? It's hard to see somebody. But if the dais was arranged in a slightly different fashion, in a sharper U, if you would, you guys would have a whole lot easier sight line to have conversation and dialogue, and it would promote some more conversation. But then also from a technological standpoint, those are things that we don't always think are in play, right? But from a technological standpoint, are the iPads in this example something that works well for you guys or doesn't work well for you guys? Well, as we go through the design process, what's necessary. If you guys didn't have an iPad as an example, as a design feature, if there was a screen on the back wall there that you guys could look at as opposed to turning your neck, would that obviously be helpful? I think each and every one of you would say yes. But I know at some particular point in time, there were monitors on the dais for you guys to see what was up on the screens and those types of things. So those features will be discussed as we go through the process. But those are some of the things that the design team wants to get a handle on, I think based on other parts and pieces or other conversations that have been had over the years. We know that obviously the height of that dais has been a challenge for some. Next question here. Council and committee held in a single room. One of the things that we see is that the formality of this room is good and bad, and I know why we have the formality of this particular room is to support the live stream at this particular point, where you guys used to have committee meetings in the room next door. The room next door, I got to imagine, is challenging for a meeting that would be a larger size. I think it would actually be challenging for just this size room to have this size meeting right now next door. Right now, what we're planning, and in part, 2 parts there, there's a lot of pressure on the first floor to make sure that we can put everything that's needed on the first floor. So to make a second room, i.e. even a separate courtroom, a separate room that would house a smaller meeting than maybe city council or the planning commission meeting that we saw last week, right, with a lot of people in the room. To make a room of that size on that first floor would be challenging in addition. One of the things that we've struggled with as a committee is these mass assembly spaces in general terms, and we've actually been picking those off one at a time. And that secondary committee room is one of the rooms that we've not considered. However, my last bullet there is a large caucus room that does seat 20 to 25, so that if you guys were having an executive session, you guys go in there, plenty of room for staff, plenty of room for visitors, whoever might be coming into a meeting like that. And it's also of sufficient space that, like if we were having just a workshop, we could potentially have it in that room as well. So my last slide deals with public access to council office, and then staff offices and meeting spaces. Obviously, I took that out of order, but staff offices and meeting spaces, right now, we're planning on 2 closed offices, one for the clerk and one for the deputy. This also does not include, I know that you guys share a suite with the city attorney. City attorney is accounted for, but not accounted for in these totals here, as a note. Workstations for 2 records clerks. One of those I will note is a future clerk. You guys are in the process of hiring a records clerk right now. And then 2 hotel spaces. So if you guys, needed to sit down for a half an hour before a meeting, you would have a space to go and, sit a laptop and work at a desk. There are shared offices that are accounted for. These are attached to mayor's court. These are the prosecutor offices. So when if somebody was coming in for a traffic citation, they would meet with the prosecutor in this same office. In that same office and/or conference room. It's a little bit unclear right now as to whether or not those are going to have small conference tables or whether or not that would have a full desk for the prosecutor to have a conversation around. And then obviously adequate storage for some of the work that you guys do. I know I made a joke earlier about we don't get paper, but we do get paper. Jeremy can attest to having paper. So we need to accommodate it and make sure that even if the paper is only temporary, that there's a place for it to be processed, so on and so forth. Obviously, there'll be some room and some, I guess what I'll term as lighter lobby space or meeting area where you guys can have maybe a comfortable, sit down with maybe some nicer furniture, those types of things that you would see in a waiting area. And then the last question that I have formally is public access to the council office, right? Right now, we walk through the entire city hall to maybe find Jeremy back in his, not maybe find Jeremy back in his office. He's always back there when I come down. I said that wrong. But maybe find Jeremy's office, right? Because wayfinding through this particular building is tough. So, how publicly adjacent does the council office need to be to the quote-unquote front of the building, right? I don't necessarily know that you guys need a public window as an example, but should the offices be directly off of the main lobby of the building is probably one of the more critical questions and one of the questions that would really guide that first floor and how it comes together from a mayor's court, city council chamber standpoint and a council office standpoint. With that, I can take any questions. You guys can hold any questions. You can send me emails, however it is you guys are most comfortable in getting me some of that information. I can synthesize it and even send it back out to you folks as a group. I could send it back out to you folks as a group so you can see what everybody else what's thoughts were.
Comments from colleagues, questions at the moment? I think for me, it might be helpful to, if in the immediate future, if we could send some questions based on this and on what the document that Mr. Renner shared, if we could send any questions or comments to Director Schultz, copying the mayor. And maybe we can aim for a workshop sooner rather than later. To address and discuss those in more detail.
Get something warm in the winter and,
Something warm in the winter. The seat warmer for you, is that what I heard?
Yes. I would just like heat in the new building. That would be great.
Are you, you're looking at existing blueprints and looking at programming? Yeah, I'd love to sit down and look at that with you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Padova.
I have a question as far as timeline. How quickly do you need to have this information? You said you need to get information to the architect to keep that moving. What's the timeline looking like?
Yeah. So every week we meet. There is a solid revision as to each of these spaces. So the sooner the better. Especially on especially that last question. How publicly adjacent does the council offices need to be? That's critical. One of the bigger challenges right now is the smaller and tighter that first floor space gets, as an example, it shrinks the new construction potential and then pushes uses up into the building, right? So what happens in the lobby impacts the entire building program at this particular time. So the longer this schematic process takes, the longer it will take for us to get into design development documents.
So,
I know that didn't directly answer your question, I apologize.
so I guess more specifically, if we were to meet next week before our meeting, would that be delaying things too much, or would that be?
Nope.
Okay.
That would be ideal.
And currently, is the thought to have council offices on the first floor?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yep.
So the public access is just how, if it's in the front, if it's in the back, how actual visible it is?
Correct,
Okay.
because if I go back to this picture here, I think you guys can all see in the lightest portion of that where you have the shadow protruding out into the area, picture that as the existing building, right? Then you have that long shaded area where the shadow protrudes into, that's all new construction of that double high ceiling. So city council chambers it will be in the front of the building, right? So people walk in through that main lobby and they see council chambers almost immediately. You know, so council chambers, the further we push that back in the building, the further you are away from the lobby. So if somebody was to come and see Jeremy, you know, during the day or whatever, he'd actually have to walk out and meet them in a public location and escort them back into the more secure portion of the building, right? So how far forward council office should be is really the question. And there's really three zones. There's the public zone, we'll call it that. Then there's the intermediate zone where you're really, really close, you know, but there's maybe one secure door. And then there's other further security as you get deeper into the building that prevents, well, it's just a secondary layer of security once you get deeper into the building. And it has its pros and cons, right? I mean, depending on where you are.
I would assume that our clerk here would have some kind of voice on this whole thing. You are there every day and every evening, and I think that you need to be part of this. We don't, you know, I don't know about you, I don't come here every day and spend hours. So this is, I think, something that you should be part of. And
I know
hope
we've
everybody else
appreciated,
agrees.
we've appreciated Clerk Van Meter's input thus far, and I certainly think it's up to you as to whether, I think it would be helpful to have him in this, if we're going to have a workshop next week, to participate in that.
Yeah, getting him involved in that document was actually one of the first steps. But now I'm hearing tonight some information that's a little bit new, to be fair. So we'll hurry up and actually get these, the workshops scheduled so that we're not delaying anything.
Very good. Anyone else? For the time being? Yes, Mrs.
I'm just real
McGregor.
happy this is,
Yeah.
so we don't look like talking heads up here.
You can even see them.
Ms. Patel.
I mean, also, I want to thank you for the thought put into having additional space if we are at capacity, because I was at a planning commission meeting back in the late summer, early fall, when there were people sitting outside, myself included, and it was very hard to hear what was going on out there. I know I was emailing you, like, can you turn up the volume? So it'll be nice to have an additional space where people can still see and hear what's going on, even if the room is full. So thank you for thinking about that.
All right, thank you, Director. Thank you. Okay, next up, tobacco retail licensing, Franklin County Public Health. Item coming back before committee. I know we've had a couple of presentations. And speaking with President Renner, I think my goal in having this back is just to sort of get a sense from colleagues, what is the will of council? Where do we want to go? What would we like our process to look like? So to kick things off, I'll turn things over to Mr. Renner.
Mr. Weaver, I think you fairly summarized the salient natures. You know, if everybody recalls, we did have public health come in and give us somewhat of an update about where they are. They did provide, even after that, updated drafts of what licensing contracting is. My own personal opinion, I think I'm more comfortable with going after the licensing aspect, but I'm not an attorney and I don't understand some of the things that's in this contract, so we need to understand what our liabilities are. But I'm not so comfortable with the outright ban on the flavored vaping and that kind of stuff. My personal opinion is that we just focus and put meat in the licensing agreement and go in that direction. But I think Mr. Weaver is right. We need to understand from the council body what are the things that we want to target in the license.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. I'll ask Mr. Roth. I had mentioned to the city attorney a couple weeks ago if his shop could take a look at some of the draft ordinances, and if there were any concerns with pursuing one of those or the other, if we could have those. Has there been an opportunity for that yet?
I don't know if Mr. Malarski did. He never mentioned it to me. I saw this on the agenda tonight and had my own thoughts a little bit, but it's not something Mr. Malarski and I have discussed.
Happily take your thoughts, Mr. Roth.
There's a distinction here with these type of health department violations versus what's already criminal. It is criminal in Ohio to sell cigarettes to people under the age of 21. That is enforced by the police. I know our police did a sting operation last year, and I think, I don't know if the chief recalls, I think there were 2 license holders that were cited out of that when they went citywide and tried to make purchases with an underage person, which is what we do with alcohol sales. This, what's proposed by the health department, is licensing them and them doing some enforcement as well as what's already in the revised code, which I don't think is a bad thing by any means. It's just different from what we've ever done before. And I think the reality is there isn't as much cigarette enforcement as there is underage alcohol enforcement. The state does have a whole police agency that goes after alcohol license holders. So.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing that, Mr. Roth. I really do definitely appreciate that. Some of the other aspect of this is actually the education. And that's what really attracted to me is, you know, public health, as you said, is also doing an enforcement, but public health would also be doing an education, which each one of these vendors, and our police department is, they're not for that. They're not trained to do that. And the city, I wouldn't be really asking the city to do that as well, because public health is actually the entity that knows how to do that. And so I just wanted to iterate that there's an educational component that is really nice before we actually even get to the enforcement process.
Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
I think I asked when we had somebody from the Board of Health here, if they had any examples of where they had cited people before, and I don't know if that's ever, I mean, has anybody been cited? I mean, how effective is the licensing? Have they really cited anybody, or there's been, you know, fines paid? Because apparently we're not the first ones to do this, so, you know, I mean, if nobody has ever been cited, I kind of doubt the efficiency of the operation. I mean, if it's a big enough problem to do this, then there should be some citing. And I know kids are doing it because my grandson said the other day that kids in the middle school are, you know. I said, how do they do that? He said they blow into their sleeve when the teacher's out of the room.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Caleb says that there are certain restrooms to go to that are smoke-free, but there are other restrooms that are not. So
You mean they're designated smoke-free, or they just, they don't go there?
yeah, you don't go to certain
Okay.
restrooms because you know that it's going to be smoke.
They
Okay.
should all be smoke-free.
I understand that. I do understand that. And while I really don't think that we're going to really solve the schools problem, but what we are trying to do is trying to still reinforce keeping tobacco sales away from children. So if that makes sense. It sounds like I'm probably talking two sides of my mouth, and I apologize, but that's why I really like the education component of this, is that the public health will go to these retailers and help them understand the nuances of product placement, that whole process of what to do, so.
Can we get some statistics from the?
I think yes, I think you're asking good questions, and the Public Health Department is the only one that actually can give that answers. And so maybe what we can do is, with Jeremy's help, detail what our questions are from the council body, and then send those over to the Public Health Department.
I think that sounds, anybody else? I think that sounds like a good plan to me. Yes, Ms. Angela.
Yeah, on the converted from C, the census place, and it has all of the cities here listed. Some of them have yeses that obviously they're already working, but some of them have empty spots, and I'm questioning why they would have empty spots.
I
Rather
believe-
than, see, there's a,
I
like-
believe those are ones that I've already passed.
well, there's like Dublin. Dublin has nothing there when it says interested for,
So all of them.
Right.
yeah.
They're not interested in further discussion, I guess.
Oh, okay, I guess.
I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Dove is right.
I believe that those are the ones that have already passed, so there's nothing there for whether they're interested since it's passed.
Got it. That makes
And
sense.
I believe that all of the ones that have passed have been within like the last few months, is that right? So I'm not sure that they would actually have any statistics on,
Actually, it looks to
Yeah,
me that
Dublin's-
they don't want to discuss it, rather than taking it apart, because they have the other ones after that. Of course, there's,
been around
well,
for a
wait a
while
minute,
in
there's,
Columbus, hasn't
actually, there's some other little ones.
No.
Okay, go ahead. I'm
well,
sorry.
yes, but that one is done by, what is it? Columbus Public Health, not
Okay.
Franklin. So I guess maybe we would want to reach out to Columbus Public Health rather than
Yeah, you're right.
Franklin County.
So I think if Mr. Clerk's going to be reaching out to Public Health, I think if there are any questions in the meantime before this comes back, could we send those questions to the clerk and he can get those over to Public Health?
Yeah, why don't we just set like by Friday, by this Friday, everybody, if you have questions, send them to Jeremy. Jeremy will compile them and then send them on to Public Health. And we can copy everybody and just see it that way.
And I think Mrs., the point of, has this been working? Because it's already, people have done it. If you could get that from the Board of Health, that Because if nothing's happening, then nothing's happening. And if kids are still going in and getting them, that's just sick. Oh, I'm sorry. That's something that we should be closing down the place if that's true.
Yes, Ms. Padova.
So, Mr. Roth, you said that there was a sting operation. Did you say that was on tobacco or
I believe so.
alcohol?
Yeah.
And so, Chief, are you doing those frequently?
On tobacco and alcohol, we do them periodically throughout the year. Generally, what they are is complaint-based. So we'll get tips maybe from parents that their children had purchased tobacco or a vape device at a certain location, and then we'll go out and we'll work several in the area, including the businesses that we get complaints on, but we'll do several, so we're just not focused on, one particular business. And we do a couple of times a year. I don't really have a number, but we also do underage alcohol sales as well.
And so have you found that there have been, like, how do those go? Are there a lot of people that are selling the vape products to?
I would say in general, people are in compliance. Occasionally, if we do have a business that we get tips on, we will generally issue a citation. I think we had 2 the last time.
Would you be able to look back and send some of those numbers to Jeremy, just so that we have a better idea of what's
Like the
what's
number
happening
of
here and what those numbers
number
look
of
like?
businesses we checked versus number of citations issued, or
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think last year they focused on like gas stations and convenience stores. They don't get a lot of complaints like Kroger sells cigarettes, but not to minors normally. And they found after going to, I think it was more than 10, they had 2 that they cited.
Could you include with that the consequence? And I understand that the criminal consequence would be directed at that individual clerk that made the sale and not at the business. So if you could include that information, the misdemeanor level and the statute under which they were cited, that would be helpful.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on that? Right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that gives us a bit of a sense of where we want to go, so I appreciate it. Okay, last item this evening, zoning code update. Director Blackford, thanks for sticking around. Or Mayor?
Well, we're going to start with me, and as
Okay.
usual, then I'll pass off to Director Blackford. So I really asked to have this on the agenda tonight. As council is aware, Planning Commission last week met in these chambers again to review and vote upon a proposed project for a gas station in the northeast corner of the city. I don't have to tell council, there was a great deal of consternation about that project based on the collective emails that we were all receiving from residents, and as well as comments that were made that night here in the chambers. I know many of you, and almost all of you, were here that night. Although I have no role or vote in Planning Commission, I nonetheless sat in this chair, as I do for nearly every one of their meetings, because I view their meetings as important. They take legislative action on behalf of the city. I view it as an opportunity to hear concerns and questions from residents, as well as the types of concerns and questions that Planning Commission is raising. As you know, I think it was a little frustrating for all of us because neither the mayor nor council has a voice or a vote in any aspect of this particular project. That is just not the way our project is established under code. It just does not allow for council input. And as mayor, I don't ever get to vote on anything. I get to sit here and offer my opinion on some things sometimes, but I don't ever get to vote on anything. We just don't have that legal ability to do so in a project that was of the type that came before Planning Commission and then BZBA and back to Planning Commission. Given the questions and some of the comments and concerns that were raised by residents, and given some of the confusion that is very clearly exists around what the process is, who decides what and when, I did think it would be helpful if I invited Director Blackford to come here this evening to give you an update on an ongoing project that we have had, and that is the work that we have been doing in rewriting our zoning code. Director Blackford previously stood before you on another presentation and shared that our zoning code, as it currently exists, was written in the late 1950s. We embarked upon the project of we need to update our code more than a year ago. That is a project that has been near and dear to Director Blackford's heart, probably maybe a little too near and dear at times. And that project is extremely tedious and detailed. I think maybe you've seen some articles in the newspaper. The City of Columbus is currently rewriting their zoning code. I think it's been 2+ years in the making, including soliciting input from pretty much everybody, from developers to residents to businesses, et cetera. Our goal has always been to have an updated code, a modern code, officially adopted by council by the end of this year, and to have a code that reflects current development trends, as well as a code that keeps an eye toward the future of what we can expect to see coming. In the meantime, we will be pursuing low-hanging fruit, what I call those low-hanging fruit changes. Director Blackford actually very shortly will be taking some of those low-hanging fruit changes to Planning Commission, and those simply will be very subtle changes to clean up how the code reads to make it easier for our residents to understand, particularly as we start to get into the springtime with permitting and sheds and fences and those types of things. But it can be, the way that our code currently reads, it can be very difficult to understand. So some of those low-hanging fruit changes will be bringing those forward. But I did ask Director Blackford to be prepared to come to you tonight to talk about the status of that project. Again, it's been going on for more than a year. The work that's been done so far, what the next steps look like, and then to outline for you what the projected timeline looks like for you and your input in this project as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said. So brief presentation tonight. Again, you know, as the mayor said, she used the exact words I would, and that's extremely tedious to write a zoning code. That is not something that staff can do alone. We do have a consultant. The company is ZoneCo. That is an Ohio group. It's probably what's developing as, you know, one of the premier folks that do zoning code rewrites. The principal is a former attorney for the city of Cincinnati, also a planner. They've rewritten several of the zoning codes in this region and do the work throughout the country. In fact, he speaks regularly at a lot of our industry functions and does that on a really countrywide basis, not just within this particular region. So again, we partnered with ZoneCo. We are on approximately our 5th draft of the zoning code. It feels like 500, but I think it's really more like 5. With this last draft feedback that staff gave the consultant, we're hoping that the draft code is at a condition that's, that we can start sharing it and then having some meaningful engagement opportunities with council, planning commission, the community at large. We already have engaged with the community as part of this project. A couple of years ago, we did a survey, not to be confused with our land use plan survey, similar but different. The focus of that survey was on the architectural standards, materials, signage, things of that nature. So we have already engaged with the community. That will be forthcoming in the future as well. So upcoming events, second quarter here, which is almost upon us. We do plan on having some workshops with City Council and Planning Commission. When I'm all done, I would love to have any feedback on topics you all would like to discuss. We're gonna take that information. We're going to revise the zoning code as necessary. We're also going to have some opportunities to engage with the community. One of the things that we're targeting is really to get, be involved in a community event, perhaps at Creekside during some activities down there, to solicit some input that we normally don't get in the governmental process. The goal, as the mayor said, is definitely to have adoption by the end of this year. So hopefully that's a little bit sooner than later. As the mayor stated, we are working on some low-hanging fruit. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be before you covering those changes. This is to improve the permitting process. in these changes that we've worked on, did not adversely affect the zoning code rewrite. Again, these are pretty simple, straightforward changes that will be taken forward to you here in the very near future. There's a few items I'd like to kind of say. What might we expect from a new zoning code? A few of those items of what to maybe expect and maybe what not to expect here. One of the things that's been lacking, in my opinion, and I think it's also been identified with Go Forward Gahanna and some of the other initiatives the city has gone through, is that our current zoning code lacks design standards with teeth. What do I mean by that? If you're not familiar with our design standards, currently in most areas of the city, we have language such as harmonious colors and quality building materials. At the end of the day, that means something different to everyone. We need things that are a little bit more specific, and that's, again, what we're going to try to draw out from all the engagement opportunities. But, get away from harmonious colors and a lot of zoning codes. It's certainly, if this is the route we want to go, and this is something that we've talked about, we can have specific color palettes. We can have a limitation on colors, the amount of glazing and things like that. Those are things that most modern zoning codes have some level of standards. What's the right level for us? Well, we'll figure that out as we go through the process, the engagement process. Updated zone districts, so by uses and development standards. Zoning codes have been around for a long time. It's basically been added to. It's never really been rewritten. If we really dial it back and we go back to, let's say recently I looked at the 1975 zoning code, we'll see that the uses, the terminology really haven't changed. The types of zoning, the types of uses, and after a certain amount of time, the city evolves. It's certainly evolved a lot since 1975. I think it's a great opportunity with a zoning code rewrite to really look at what uses are appropriate and in what locations. And then we really want to place those zoning categories strategically, again, to promote the goals and values of the community. So that's part of where do we want uses to happen from a zoning standpoint? Where do we see those zoning districts being located throughout the city? In my opinion, this is probably a good engagement activity, but obviously there can be other ones as well. And this one's very important for us staff. We get a lot of feedback from folks, even architects and engineers who do this for a living, that our code isn't really formatted in a way where anyone can really find anything. So that means people don't look. So it's a burden on the internal and external customer. So one of the major goals and objectives is, again, a modernized code that is much more concise and easier to navigate and understand. And that's really something, here in a moment, I'll put up just a quick image of what our current zoning code looks like and what our proposed code will look like. The current code is 399 pages if you were to print it out. That's an extremely large document for a suburban zoning document. It's very heavy on legalese. There's not a lot of tables and charts. And so when you look at more modern zoning codes, you get more to pictures, plain language, charts, rather than very verbose legalese. What not to expect with the zoning code rewrite? Well, you can't stop development requests. So people will always have the right to propose something, and that's, from the owners of the property with their authorization. It's just a matter of process, but there's no way to stop development requests. You cannot consider, who the tenant or, the company is. Those are things that's not a zoning code issue. That's what, the legal parameters are for property rights. Also, notice requirements have come up a lot. That really delves into a lot of different areas, and I would say that's also in the charter, so there's actually limitations of what can be done in the charter as well. So the zoning code plays a part in that, plays a role, but there's also branches out into other areas. And really quickly here, I'll just kind of scroll through if you're curious. I'm sure we don't have anything better to do at 8:30 at night. If we were just to look at an example of the zoning code right here, here's our current zoning code. And when you scroll through this, again, folks, reading is not something a lot of people do for recreational habits anymore. It's tough to get folks to to stop and read things. This is one zoning category. I'm still on the uses. We've gone through 2.5 pages just for one zoning category here. Very detailed. A lot of things that shouldn't be in code is in our current code. If we take a look, and please ignore the highlights and the bubbles, but right here, here's a use table in the draft code. This is a total of just over 2.5 pages, and this would be for all the zoning classifications, not just one. So again, we're consolidating in one area things that are just scattered throughout the current code. And so again, that's one of the main functions is improvement there. And with that, I would love any feedback as far as the process, especially with topics that we might want to cover with future workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Well, I'll just thank you for the presentation, and I think for me, the item that stands out most to me is the workshops with Planning Commission and Council. Appreciate being involved earlier in the process rather than later, so that we can have that input and have that dialogue as a body. Questions and comments from my colleagues. Mr. Renner.
Just to dovetail on that, Director, when do you expect some of the workshops will begin with council, with planning, and then with the public?
Council and planning should be the second quarter. We just recently provided a lot of comments for the consultant to revise, but hopefully that document gets us in a place where we feel real comfortable in looking at it and talking about it and making tweaks rather than, large changes. So hopefully I would say April, May, again, second quarter.
Excellent. Thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, I'll just offer feedback. Again, thank you to the mayor and to Director Blackford for bringing this item onto committee tonight. There's been a lot of discussion around zoning, not just as arising out of the current proposal, but regionally, a lot of conversation on the topic. So thank you for the update. I do want to also just note, I appreciate that you have included multiple references to the land use plan, even in tonight's presentation. Mr. Schnetzer and I were reflecting on what an incredible resource tool document that is, and that it was, yes, predates a pandemic, but also still contains a lot of really valuable guidance for this community that I certainly feel that we need to keep our eyes on and use that as informing our land use. So thank you.
When is the next time for the charter to be?
2026.
Also needed.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Director. Thanks for sticking it out last time. Without seeing nothing further, we'll go ahead and adjourn the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.